Welcome to Gulp, everybody. I'm Ben.
And I'm John. And today we're going to be serving up some October leftovers.
This is the show where John and I go over the movies that we saw in the month of October that we didn't necessarily get a chance to talk about individually with the review show. So we have some good ones, some that John saw that I didn't, vice versa, and then some that we saw together. So what do you say we get started, John?
Let's do it.
Okay, I'll go first because I saw what I think was the first October release, at least on this list, and that was Venom, Let There Be Carnage. And boy, it gives you exactly what some people want. And the very first frame of this movie, I'm like, this is going to be a ride, just like the first one. And it didn't disappoint in that sense. I even feel it's a little tighter, a little bit better directed, even more self-aware, going even more over the top. So I kind of had a big giant smile on my face the whole time because it's basically a comedy. It's a complete comedy. Like the bad guy and the threat level, that stuff's just like bullshit.
Having not seen it, I know that from the first film, the best aspect of it was the comedy and the banter between Tom Hardy and the Venom character. So if they go deeper into that, that's the right direction to go.
They go way deeper into it. And some people could say that it goes too far with the Venom character. Like he's just a self-parody, but I fucking loved that stuff. Like, so as dumb and goofy as I know this movie is, I had so much fun with it. How can I shit on it? You know, it was exactly what it wanted to be. And I think, what's his name? Andy Serkis did a great job. Like he took the keys and did the same thing that Fleischer did. He didn't fuck anything up. It didn't change too much, but it does have a little bit. It's a little tighter of a movie, I think, with a clearer story, but that's because it doesn't have to be an origin. So yeah, I was
wondering if all of his experience with motion capture, playing all those characters and helping develop that technology to some degree over all the movies he's worked on, if that translated into a better Venom performance or a better use of that kind of motion capture CGI in this.
It definitely looks a lot better. It looks a lot better. And you could chalk that up to a couple of extra years of technology getting better, but that's a great point. Serkis knows that stuff better than anybody does. If I have a nitpick, it's just that how Carnage becomes Carnage is ridiculous, but it fits with how ridiculous the movie is. And as much as I love Michelle Williams, there's really no reason for her to be in this movie. She's not even the love interest anymore. But I love seeing her, and she looks amazing in this movie, so that's fine. And they give the liquor store clerk, Mrs. Chen, more screen time, and she's lovely.
No Time to Die, the latest James Bond adventure, the last of the Daniel Craig adventures.
Right.
I've been on board with the Daniel Craig era the whole time. I've enjoyed most of the movies, even ones that other people didn't really like. But I really loved No Time to Die. Seeing a movie that I really had high hopes for, that I'd waited years for, that was a conclusion and a continuation of characters and stories that I'm already invested in. So I was just really excited to get the opportunity to finally go see this. And it lived up to all my expectations, even went beyond, I'd say. It's not a perfect movie. Very few movies are. The Daniel Craig movies can be a little bit light on action sometimes. And this one is not. This one is fast-paced all the way through, at least for it's 2 hours and 40 minutes, I want to say, or something. So it's the longest of all the Bonds. Some would say that's unnecessary for a Bond movie to ever be that long.
Did it feel it?
But see, this one, I think, has you supercharged, not feeling any length of this movie for an hour and 45 minutes, probably the full 2 hours. Then the last half hour of the movie is where you start to feel the runtime or realize maybe they could wrap this up quicker in its finale. And the finale is the least exciting, in my opinion, when it comes to, there's still a big action scene that takes place towards the end of the movie, but it's the least engaging part of the action set pieces. But there's an aspect of the ending of the film that is divisive for many, even people who love James Bond or other just casual fans who could care less how a James Bond movie concludes, seem to take issue with this one. I almost feel like this is one of my favorite James Bond movies ever.
Wow.
It's a very James Bond movie, in my opinion, where some of the Daniel Craig movies along the way have forgone using gadgets, and the villains don't feel like a typical James Bond villain. And there's just aspects across his movies that don't live up to exactly. They tried to reinvent James Bond a bit, and therefore things don't work out exactly the way you always expected from the previous James Bond.
Right.
This one feels very much like it was trying to hit that formula with gadgets and, you know, just the right amount of the side characters being involved, whether it's M or Q, a number of Bond girls throughout the film, a couple different ones and stuff like that. It still is in the Daniel Craig era where they don't have him as much of a womanizer as you've grown up to James Bond being, which is understandable. You know, in the era we're living in, that's totally fine. But the James Bond or the Bond girls that are in the film are great. I think the villains are good. The main villain by Rami Malek is kind of the weaker part of the James Bond formula that I think they do a good job with, but still kind of falter on the villain. Hans Zimmer's score. This is the first time Hans Zimmer stepped in to do a James Bond movie. You still get that bombastic Inception and Dark Knight feel that he brings to too many movies at this point, but with the James Bond theme being played within that. And that just had me so thrilled during the action scenes, like actually fist pumping, like this is freaking awesome. So anybody who overlooked seeing No Time to Die, felt like, I don't care, I'll rent it on video. I think it lives up to being worth seeing on the big screen with the sound, the music, the spectacle, tons and tons of action. It looks beautiful. I'd say behind Skyfall, it's the second best looking cinematography for a James Bond movie. So it worked on a lot of the filmmaking levels. It was an interesting and engaging enough story for me for a James Bond movie. Daniel Craig still does a great job in the role. And it really was that formula that I feel I hadn't gotten really yet from 5 Daniel Craig films, where they just made sure it hit all the proper marks for a James Bond movie this time out. And I loved it. So everyone go check it out.
Dun, 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 dun. So we're moving on. You know what's funny too is we're doing a Halloween leftovers of the movies we saw in October during the Halloween season. And the Halloween Kills, that movie that we saw together, is by far the worst movie on this list. Probably the worst movie of the year.
So if we're talking leftovers, this is the thing you found already molding in the fridge that you're like, I'm not going to go anywhere near that. That's going straight to the trash can. We are not eating these leftovers.
Oh my God. I've almost said every hateful thing I can say about this movie. So now I'm just like exhausted from it, because it's just, I'm going to be the most professional, articulate critic ever and say this movie was just a piece of shit. You know, it just was.
Such a true review right there. This was the review I was giving all throughout the movie while it was playing in the theater. You probably heard it. Over and over, like every 5 seconds, I was like, are you kidding me? Oh my God, this is so dumb.
They are now retconning things that just happened in the previous movie that was there to retcon everything that happened for the past 40 years. They can't even decide if they like their own stuff that they're writing, you know? Like, and I'm sorry, this Halloween I watched the wonderful original Halloween and the direct follow-up Halloween 2. I think both of those movies are great for different reasons. I think Halloween 2 is great. And if this series wants to, these assholes, dickwads that thought they were better than every other Halloween movie that came out, and were like, well, we want to restructure everything because those movies are bullshit. And this is what you give us? This is worse than 4. This is worse than 2. This is worse than 2.
4 is a masterpiece in the realm of the Halloween universe.
I like 4. It's good.
4 is great.
This one to me is, God, could you say it's better than Resurrection just because Resurrection is hardly a movie? Like, it's not even trying to be a movie. It's trying to be a reality MTV show.
As you pointed out while watching this, one thing that hurts this movie the most for me is its mean spirit.
Yeah, it's so
horror
gross.
movies horror movies can get away with one or two moments where you're like, man, that was a bit over the top. That was mean-spirited. But this was every kill. And it was just grinding on you by the end that you weren't enjoying. There was very few kills that you could enjoy because they took them too far.
The kills weren't scary. They were gross and angry, and like, you linger on a poor woman getting like a light bulb shoved in her neck. It's not scary. It's just disturbing. Mm-hmm. And everyone that's defending this movie is like, well, come on, what do you expect? It's a slasher movie. It's like, dude, well, look at the first one. There's no blood in that movie,
Yeah. As you said, right from the opening scene of this movie, they're retconning their own movie from a few years ago. I definitely didn't want to see Donald Pleasance digitally recreated and having entire scenes. Like, a line of dialogue for a dead character doesn't bug me that much, but to have whole scenes, even if his family signed off on it, it was just creepy to think, okay, every actor who's passed on is now going to be shoehorned back into their own series 30 years after they died. Evil dies tonight.
I was just going to ask you, does Evil die tonight?
No.
Can you tell me once
spoiler,
again?
No.
I don't think I got it the last 50 times. When does Evil die?
Evil dies tonight!
Evil dies tonight.
Unless Evil is every person in Haddonfield. No, Evil didn't die tonight.
Yeah, I this movie abandons probably the best line in the 2018 one, which is the only self-aware moment in this new franchise so far. And it's when that teenage boy goes, remember, like, this just nobody, like, killed 3 teenagers one night, like 40 years ago? Like, who fucking cares?
But then they kind of retcon it again, where it's like, oh no, the whole town has been traumatized by these 3 murders that took place 40 years ago that no one saw anything except for Laurie. I get it that, like, Tommy Doyle would be kind of fucked up, like, I get that because he was the closest to it all. But all he did was like run out of a house screaming. He saw the boogeyman. He saw a man in a mask. Has he watched a horror movie in the last 40 years? Maybe not, because he's a little traumatized kid. But if you watch any horror movie, you get the same freaking thing happening.
Out of all the characters they bring back, he was the closest to actually being a part of the danger.
Sure. I could agree.
It's like Lindsay Wallace, like, didn't see anything.
Well, and then the one that makes zero sense is the nurse.
The
older nurse. If you're retconning out Part 2 and H2O and other movies that she has shown up in, her only interaction with Michael Myers in the original film is her car is stolen, that he hits the window of her car, smashes it, grabs her hair, she dives out of the car, and he drives away. Traumatizing, yes, but it has no connection to actually being in Haddonfield and the murders that take place there.
They don't know where to go with these new movies that they wanted to make. That first one, if they just ended it there, the 2018 one, I'd be like, okay, it wasn't worth redoing, but it's fine, whatever. Yeah. It's like, but now it's like, it's almost like these jerks are fucking with everyone and going like, hey, we're going to retcon all these shitty ones and make it better. And then they just keep making it worse and worse and worse.
How about this, huh? I didn't mean to do this. Locals only, you fucking grommet.
And they were trying to retcon out, part of what they wanted to retcon out, not just the family connection that John Carpenter or whoever didn't like about Laurie and Michael, brother and sister.
I was always fine with, but
yeah, that part's fine. It was the later stuff where he becomes the Thorn clan or whatever, and they go into the mystic stuff and the druid stuff. The reason why he's supernatural. These 2 movies are supposed to help rewrite all that shit out of it. Well, once you've seen Halloween Kills, explain to me the ending of this movie if there isn't a supernatural element, because it doesn't make any sense.
And when Michael Myers gets up after thousands of bats to the heads and shotgun shells in its chest.
Not these kind of bats.
And gets up and kills 50. By the way, this is the most violent Halloween movie. It probably has more kills than every prior movie combined.
Yeah.
So many deaths in this movie.
And the lingering on so many of the deaths, that they don't just have a quick death, that people have to sit there and suffer on camera and bleed out and things like that.
These guys sold everybody this bill of goods that they're here to save this franchise and bring it back from mediocrity or just awfulness. And like, look what they've done. They fucking trashed it. They've toilet papered it.
In the 2018 one, they did have a couple moments where I felt like, ooh, slasher movies on the big screen, not relegated to direct-to-video type of filmmaking, is back a little bit. Like we had some fun some moments that felt like what we grew up on in terms of slasher film.
Sure.
This sequel doesn't do any of that. It had the moment has many moments where he creeps into someone's house, and if they just shot it in the right way to build up some tension, you can have your payoff with an ultra violent kill if that's what you want to do, but at least have some tension building the scenes up.
Yeah, he just walks into someone's house. So the writers think they're funny, so they establish like these characters that are just going to die in that scene. So it doesn't matter that they're quirky characters, an old couple trying to use a drone. It's like, wow, that was cool. Let's watch them get murdered horrifically in slow, brutal, disturbing, gross fashion. And the first one, you're right. Like I didn't particularly like the take they did where they made it all Michael Myers' perspective as he's going around the neighborhood and breaking into houses. I like the first movie so much because it's never from his, well, it is when you see just POVs, but he's always lurking. He's coming at you. I don't want to follow Michael Myers around on his adventures. I don't want to know when he's going into a house to kill someone, you know? And that's what the first one did that I didn't like. This one just doesn't have anything. It's just so lazy. And it's like, it just wanted to concentrate on being a fan film so much with like, hey, look who's back. Look who's back. You remember that gas station attendant?
There's so many movies in the Halloween series. It's not like one where you're like, oh, I'm going to sit down and watch them all, because you kind of can't. And they go in different directions. There's no reason you have to watch them all. There's
like 10 different trilogies you can mix and match.
Yeah. So this is my least favorite direction the series has ever been able to go.
If your whole marketing and your motivation behind doing something to quote unquote retcon something that you thought was garbage, do a good job. The last movie that you and I saw together was Dune, Denis Villeneuve's take. So a long time ago, these were called like unfilmable books, but clearly that this is the second movie made, and there was TV miniseries made, so clearly it is filmable. You know?
If we had done a most anticipated films of the year at the beginning of this year, which I realized why we didn't, because we didn't even know what movies would get released, but this would, any year that this was coming out, this would have been on towards the top of my list because of Denis Villeneuve, because of what he's been able to do in the world of science fiction over the last few years with Arrival and Blade Runner. This seems right up that alley, especially of the kind of the Blade Runner kind of being able to bring a universe to life, a unique looking universe with interesting sci-fi ideas implied. So, going into this, I had high anticipation and would have expected this to be at least in a top 5 of the year for me. And I was very, very disappointed with this movie.
I was bummed more for you because as much as I love Denis Villeneuve, I didn't anticipate, I wasn't really high on this one just because I don't care that much about the subject matter. And it just looked, look at what's right behind you. It's just gray and dark. My biggest thing on not being that excited was that Roger Deakins was not going to shoot it. And when I found that out early, I'm like, well, then at least I don't even have that to look forward to. The guy they got was fine, but it just, I don't know. This movie to me was like, it was so dark that it was hard to see. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is like spectacle visual filmmaking at its greatest. I'm like, were you guys wearing fucking night vision goggles? How did you see half of the shit that was going on? And without spoiling anything, I'm looking at that cast behind you. Who the fuck is left for another movie?
I wasn't even paying attention to that, but you're right. Yeah.
I didn't anticipate it. So when I saw it, I was like, all right, it's fine. I did find it quite boring a lot. I could tell that from the trailers that I don't care about Paul Atreides or whatever. Like, I'm not going to get on board with this character, and I never did. My favorite character was Aquaman. Like, he was my favorite character, and I've never been able to say that about Jason Momoa.
My man.
I think my favorite character was Oscar Isaacs. Everyone's very dull and dry. There's 100%. Not a whole lot of life to these characters, but that's the world they're inhabiting. It
is. But look at the charismatic lineup of that. And no one is really charismatic in this movie.
But I think probably one of the best performances in the film is Rebecca Ferguson. I do think that she gives a really good performance. she has a lot more to do than almost any of the characters, including Paul to some degree. So the fact that she's still around for the sequel is at least promising.
Yeah, I guess we get Sanjaya back too, right, or whatever.
They don't really get to that point of the story where her character is starting to be developed yet, and that's all for a sequel, and that's fine. Maybe there's some great things to come with her character.
Sanjaya, you are going home tonight.
That is one of my issues with this movie, for it being over 2 hours and 30, 40 minutes, whatever it is. There's a lot of time spent on flashbacks and flash forwards, or dream sequences, imagery that isn't part of this actual film or story. And I was never engaged in what that's trying to show me and entice me to care about for a future installment.
Yeah.
It didn't hit for me at all in terms of storytelling and character. And I don't care that the visuals occasionally look nice. I totally agree with your point that there's a lot of this film that's hard to see, especially anything that takes place at night. Or
my favorite thing about the movie, for sure, is that sound design mixed with. I do love the visual, all of the artwork, the ships that they create. That's the coolest thing for me. Is like all these ships are very unique looking and different looking, and they really spend a lot of time showing how they operate and maneuver and work. You know, the mechanics
don't work.
That stuff was really getting my attention, especially how they mix it with all the sound. When the big thing happens in the second act that shifts the whole movie, you know, the big attack thing, it's like I don't feel like it's earned to that point, because you've heard a couple of things about like, oh well, the big emperor guy wants the Atreides to move into this house. Why? Well, we're kind of told it, but not really. And then, it was all a setup. It's like, but why was it a setup? We don't know we haven't seen those people. We don't know these people hardly at all. When we see the House of Atreides on their planet, it's just military stuff. You don't see civilians walking around. You don't see life. It's just ships and people lined up in rows. So I just don't care about anything, because you're just not given a reason to care when the shit hits the fan. You know what I mean?
But I almost feel like the world put on screen in the 84 version, I like the set design there more.
It's much dirtier and grimy.
Yeah. I don't know. It just feels like more of an interesting world to experience than the version we get with Denis Villeneuve.
Because it has more quirky Lynchness to it. So it's not so stoic and militarized. You know, there's all this setup, but it all kind of is.
Which is a shame. They had 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
They had all this screen time.
Yeah.
You know, great actors to get this point across, and it doesn't come across. So many points do not come across very well.
But I'm nailing this movie, but I do think it's decent. I don't say good. I think it's decent. I enjoyed a lot of it. I was bored a lot of times. I was struggling to stay awake in the theaters. But I don't want to give it a negative review, because it was better than I was expecting it to be for me, because I wasn't expecting much.
And I don't want to say that it's, you know, it deserves to be considered completely a negative review either. But right. I'm willing to be pretty harsh on it, because I wanted more from Denis Villeneuve and from this new exciting sci-fi world that seemed like it had a lot to offer. And after 2 hours and 40 minutes of time spent in it, I don't really care to revisit it, and I don't feel like I learned a whole lot of interesting stuff.
Well, I'll watch the second one when and if. I know it was greenlit, but I'm still like, really? They're gonna give this another $200 million? But I don't know. We'll see. They could have had a Lord of the Rings on their hands, but maybe they took it a little too seriously. I don't know. There's things that keep it from being popcorn entertainment, and it's not as heady as they keep saying it is. Like, they're talking about there's so much lore and so much detail, and I know it's in the books, but this movie is not hard to follow. Like, it's not that dense of like, you know.
A lot of people who want to defend the film say, well, if you call it boring, then, you know, you either just want nonstop action, or you weren't smart enough to follow.
I would hope that anybody that watches our show knows not to factor those into their brains, because that's
for sure.
I want more Marvel humor. This movie did attempt humor a few times, and I was like, oh no, it wasn't funny at all.
Like, I can't even remember a time that
it was mostly Momoa like, hey man, You getting some meat on you, huh? Dig it.
Right on,
And then he's like,
dude.
"No, I'm just kidding."
My
He's
man.
just skinny little shit. I found it weird too that Paul Atreides would run up to Momo, hi, like hug him like it was his girlfriend. He'd spin him around. That guy is never gonna get bigger, man. That guy is the shrimpiest motherfucker. He makes fucking Kyle MacLachlan look like fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah,
Last Night in Soho. Really interesting, beautiful, expressive colors. It does what Edgar Wright knows best, which is merging his scores with his visuals. And boy, this one, taking place in the swinging 60s of Great Britain, has that awesome soundtrack. Just great music from that era and beautiful expressive colors. And swinging for the fences is for sure. Doesn't always pay off. There's a lot of plot holes and a lot of story beats that don't work. But it's his most ambitious film for sure, and it doesn't apply the same editing, which I was really I thought was great because he was trying something totally different.
That's what I was wondering when you mentioned the soundtrack and things like that. Was does it have moments that feel like Baby Driver, where he is trying to not make a music video, but the music tied to the way it's edited and the way the characters move throughout the scene? It has this synchronicity.
It does that, but it just does it so differently. It's such a different feel, but it does do that. It paints these beautiful visual pictures and the music applies to it. And that does happen, but it's so different than Baby Driver. And like, this is literally now Edgar Wright proving he can do any genre, anything, because this movie's hard to classify really. But I was entertained the whole time. It didn't disappoint me. It was one of my most anticipated of the year. It's not my favorite movie of the year, but it's good.
Very interested to see it. I just, without having the time to get to the theater to see it, it'll probably be something I just go out and buy and just end up seeing it there.
Things get on streaming so fast nowadays, man. They have a couple weeks to prove if they have any box office power, and then they're like, well, now it's on Peacock. It's open playing field. Like every month could be a blockbuster month because they have to spread out all these movies that never made their original release dates. So it's like any old month you can get a blockbuster. It just has to fucking release. There's like movies coming out in February that would be July releases, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting time, but we'll get back to you guys for sure.
I will say, even though, there's a number of films that I wanted to see in October, I didn't get a chance to see. I'm still behind on some major releases throughout the year that I've heard are good. I really want to see Pig, as you've pointed out. It's one of the best. I don't know if that's still maybe your favorite movie you've seen all year.
Oh God, it's my favorite movie I've seen in multiple years. Yeah.
But I will say, even though my viewing right now is a bit limited, the best movie I've seen since the pandemic started is what I got to see in October, No Time to Die.
Woo!
I mean, maybe that's singing the praises a little too high. I've seen it 2.5 times. In fact, when I came out of Dune and was super bored, I went and watched an hour of No Time to Die just to get my blood pumping.
You and I didn't. 2020, we just kind of blew the year off and did a lot of older film stuff. But if I had to pick a favorite movie of that year, it's a movie called Promising Young Woman, and I finally got a chance to see it. And boy, oh boy, that is my kind of movie. And wasn't there like a Marvel movie that came out in early November? I don't know.
I've heard it's not a Marvel movie.
So until next time, everybody, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Click like, share with your friends. I'm Ben.
And I'm John. And we eat your leftovers.
I drink your milkshake. I drink it up.